And now that we are done discussing Bellator Belfast, let's jump back over to the States where we head to Las Vegas in the flyweight division where the top 10 ranked Amanda Ribas will be taking on the former women's strawweight champion Rose Namajunas in what will be her second fight in the 125-pound division. She looks to right the ship and hop in to the rankings. Amanda Ribas entered the UFC in June of 2019 and started her UFC tenure 4-0, four straight victories, two submissions, and two decisions. That fourth victory of that win streak came on Fight Island against the biggest named opponent yet in Paige Van Zant, where she submitted her with an armbar. And funny enough, that did come in the 125-pound division, where we see her fighting still nearly 4 years later. But ever since that night, when she rallied off her fourth straight UFC victory, she has lost, won, lost, won, lost, won. Her most recent victory came in November of 2023 in a comeback third round knockout victory over Luana Pinheiro. It started with a spinning wheel kick. She finished it with strikes, and that was in the strawweight division, 115 pounds. So in the strawweight division, the 115-pound weight class, Amanda Ribas has amassed a record of 5-1 in the UFC. But when she bumps up the 10 pounds to 125, she's 2-2. The victory from July of 2020 against Paige Van Zant and a victory over Viviane Araújo last March. And the two losses at the weight class are to two top 10 opponents, and right now they're top 5 as a matter of fact. Caitlin Chookagian, formerly known as, now known as Caitlin Sermonara, and Maycee Barber. Her fight with Maycee Barber was one of the best women's fights of 2023. It did end 3 minutes and 42 seconds into the second round. Maycee Barber tallied off her fifth straight victory in that fight and has since won a sixth in a row against Caitlin Sermonara that we just saw at UFC 299. So by no means is she fighting, no-name fighters, if you will, in the 125-pound division and losing. She's beaten a top-ranked opponent. She's lost to two top-ranked opponents. But now she's fighting a former world champion in Rose Namajunas. The former two-time strawweight champion of the world, Thug Rose Namajunas, will look to have her second fight in the 125-pound division. And if she can get a win against a top 10 ranked opponent in Ribas, she looks to challenge for a title by the end of the year. Rose enters this fight on a two-fight losing streak. We go back to May of 2022 in one of the worst fights in UFC history where she lost her strawweight title, the second reign of her strawweight title, to Carla Esparza. We have, of course, seen Carla go on to lose that title to Zhang Weili. Zhang Weili has defended once against Amanda Ribas and will be defending for the second time against Yan Xiaonan here in a few weeks at UFC 300. Rose took a near year-and-a-half long hiatus after that title fight loss and came back in September of 2023 in Paris against a very strong rising contender in Manon Fiorot, who's fighting next week, as a matter of fact, against Erin Blanchfield in what seems to be a pretty much guaranteed number one contender fight. And how did Manon get to that number one contender fight? Well, she beat the former two-time strawweight champion Rose Namajunas over the course of 15 minutes in a decision victory for Fiorot in her home country of France. So Rose Namajunas has not won a fight since November of 2021 when she beat Zhang Weili via split decision in a title defense. And after hearing her throughout media day this week, it seems that she's pretty dead set on remaining at 125. She feels now at 31 years old, she's not getting any younger. The weight cuts are not getting any easier. She has her sights set now on becoming a permanent addition to this flyweight division and making a run toward the title. She said in an ideal world, she becomes a two-weight world champion, meaning not simultaneously. She had to clear that up in the press conference, but it would be her second title in a second weight class. And I've got to say, on paper, it is hard for me to envision a world where Rose Namajunas loses this fight. She has exceeded the more than 2-1 favorite spot on the betting line for this fight now. And it's just weird. You never really know which version of Rose you're going to get because at times she's the best fighter on the planet and maybe of all time. And then at other times, like the fight with Carla Esparza, she doesn't really give you much to base anything off of. Her fight with Manon Fior was a relatively good back and forth scrap, but it seemed that if she was going to stand the complete entirety of the fight with Manon, she would inevitably get outpointed by someone who was much larger than her in that cage. To add on top of that loss, Rose also broke or dislocated a pinky in that fight. It was pretty rough. So she is coming back here fully 100% healthy, feeling good mentally and physically. And she's going to need all of that because Amanda Ribas is about as tough as they come in any women's division. Rose is a fantastic fighter that is ultra well-rounded. We've seen her get amazing knockouts over Joanna Jędrzejczyk, over Zhang Weili. We've seen her utilize grappling, like in her second fight with Zhang Weili, in order to get victories. So it seems as if she is just the more polished fighter, the more well-rounded fighter in this bout. But Amanda Ribas continues to get better and better in the stand-up side of her game, and she is an ace on the ground when it comes to her offensive skills and jiu-jitsu. We saw her go toe-to-toe with Caitlin Sermonar in a fight that ended in a split decision where you could have argued she beat Caitlin in that fight. And with Macy Barber, they went tit for tat until someone was going to have to just go down in that fight. And then her other loss in the UFC at 115 pounds, she did get outclassed on the feet by Marina Rodriguez and got knocked out essentially 2 times in that fight. But that was over 3 years ago now. She has made clear improvements in her game, but will the improvements be enough to take down a former champion in Rose Namajunas? And if she can do that, she again is literally a top 10 fighter in both weight classes. I'm talking Ribas here. I personally feel that she has a higher ceiling at 115 pounds, but she seems to not have an issue going back and forth between each. Whichever fights come along are the fights that she's willing to take to climb her way up the ranks of both weight classes. Her most recent fight that we saw in November against Pinheiro, as I said, she had to come back in the third round to win that fight. That was a fight that she was going to lose. Now, Pinheiro is a top 15 ranked opponent in 115-pound division, but I, of course, would not hold her to the same regard that I would Rose Namajunas. So if she was losing that fight, how can she fare here with Rose? And especially when you're adding in the extra 10 minutes, the fourth and fifth rounds. We've seen Rose go the distance in these 25-minute bouts multiple times and not only do it, but do it and get a victory in the aftermath of it. She has more paths, at least on paper, going into this fight. It's just a matter of what version of Rose do we see. I'm not ruling out a possibility of me taking a chance on Ribas here. After all, she's the happiest fighter in UFC history. And I'll touch on some quick hitters here throughout the rest of the UFC Vegas 89 card as well before we get on out of here. Justin Tafa will be fighting this weekend, at least as of Thursday evening when I'm recording this. Just a few weeks ago, he was scheduled to fight, fell through the day before, and then his brother Junior stepped in to take his spot. Justin has bounced back from whatever injury happened in the locker rooms that day, and he'll be taking on Karl Williams in the co-main event. One of those weird heavyweight fights that somehow gets a high-profile spot on a fight night card. It's what happens. A very intriguing bout goes down in the middleweight division between AJ Dobson and Edmen Shahbazyan. The MMA community's fight of the week, the people's main event, Payton Talbott and Cameron Saaiman. Payton Talbott is 7-0. Cameron Saaiman is 9-1. His most recent and only loss was to Christian Rodriguez, who we had just seen last week take the perfect record of his third straight opponent. So Cameron looks to bounce back. Payton looks to continue a perfect resume. The community is split right down the middle on this fight, and the odds just keep going back and forth. Billy Quarantillo is taking on a short notice replacement in Youssef Zalal. This will be the re-debut of Zalal in what will be his second stint in the UFC. Billy Q, always in fun fights. I very much look forward to seeing that scrap. And throughout the remainder of the card, we have a few different Dana White Contender Series alum, some debuting, some getting their second, third, fourth fight in the UFC, and a couple of Ultimate Fighter alum as well. And one low-key banger on those prelims, Ricardo Ramos and Julian Erosa. Don't blink for that fight at 145 pounds. I look for that to be very fun if I had to pick one fight that really stands out to me on the prelims of this fight night. So it's not the craziest fight night ever. We're in that in-between of UFC 299 and UFC 300, but fights are fights, and we get them back-to-back. Friday night Bellator, Saturday night UFC. Give me all of your thoughts on this card in the comments below. Give me your predictions for that main event. Do you feel that Amanda Ribas, and even this question can be posed for Rose as well, where do they belong? Do you prefer them at 115, at 125? Do you prefer Ribas in one weight class and Rose in another? Let me know and who you think is going to win that main event in the comments below. Drop a like on this video if you enjoyed this preview. Every single week, you can catch me breaking down fights, a little bit of X's and O's talk, but I pride myself more on the storylines of every fight. How did we get here, and what is at stake? What is on the line? I also recap the most meaningful results every single weekend and give my thoughts and opinions on breaking MMA news and fight announcements. Be sure to follow along on social media, join the community as well at the BAJ MMA, and subscribe and follow on your favorite audio listening platforms such as Spotify and Apple. Any and all support is greatly appreciated. Enjoy all the fights this weekend, and I'll catch you in the next video.